in this country every 8 seconds, or about 10,000 a day. And that number is expected to continue for at least the next decade and a half as our generation continues to age out. Likewise, we are being told by experts in the field that given the current and projected realities associated with dementia and Alzheimer's, there are not and will not be enough qualified geriatric specialists, doctors, nurses, caregivers to adequately be available to take care of this expected rise in cases. The implications, long-term, for congregations are obvious. This subject, along with the allied issues of end-of-life care and the overall economics of aging, will be, I suggest to you, the most immediate social justice and family systems issue for each of us. Books like The Age of Dignity by Asian Pu detail this emerging issue. It's filled, the papers are filled with this. There's another article associated with this in the weekend edition of the Wall Street Journal. This emerging issue is now a growing truth that elder care issues are surpassing child care issues for many families. Child care and preschool, say for a kid, has a finite time limit. The care of an elderly parent or a spouse dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's can stretch, as we've already heard, for years and perhaps longer. As I said, this reality can present some creative challenges for congregational care and community programs. How can we actualize a meaningful program of inreach? How can we create compassionate visitation programs that allow for respite care and for caregivers, and for also to allow the fact that no one, Dr. Grossberg pointed this out, that no one must be allowed to remain alone. This aloneness factor, and there's a riff on a beautiful passage in Genesis 2:18, and the word livado, is a very, very powerful spiritual element. And again, because I was on the plane flying out here, in the weekend edition of the Journal, in one of the columns, again, outlined the importance of social interaction and this disease of loneliness, which corresponds to all kinds of other things, as Dr. Grossberg pointed out. This attempt on congregations, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the breakout, to combat this issue of loneliness and isolation is really going to be one of the more important issues for all of our congregations to deal with. Too many of our people fall through the cracks. And to be truthful with you, and I do not know the demographics of St. Louis, but I'll just talk about where I live back in the greater Philadelphia area. An increasing number of people of our generation are not affiliated with congregations in a formal way. This leads to this whole concept of how we approach this inreach and how families approach the concept of caregiving. This concept of caregiving, which is discussed at length within the tradition. We have a workshop called The Art of Caregiving, and it is an art. A lot of us in this room have walked this walk. A lot of us are doing it right now. The caregiving is an art. It's very, very personal, as some of us know. And it raises all kinds of psycho-spiritual issues, many often re-emerging from our own families of origin. Yet many of us know that these moments of caring can provide for us moments of spiritual meaning, often unexpected. These caregiving moments can provide opportunities for reconciliation with parents and siblings, moments of profound bonding between a parent and a child or a spouse that go to deep personal as well as spiritual levels. Many of us in this room have experienced such moments. A few more thoughts about this caregiving challenge, because it is a true family systems and multi-generational issue. You know, in the press, you usually have this term sandwich generation. You may have seen this. In my work with Jewish Sacred Aging, we never use this term. We refer to, and those of you who've been to South Jersey or Jersey and know Jersey diners, we refer to this as a club sandwich generation. And the reason is really quite simple, and some of you have lived this. Because in this caring modality, multi-generational caregiving is no longer an oddity. As it is so often, so many families that various generations have to take their turn in caring for someone. And given the dynamics of Alzheimer's and the length of time that may be encountered, the facts that many generations of a family can and are involved in caregiving should not surprise us. As I mentioned before, this art is discussed at length in the Talmud, in Masechet Kiddushin, to show you how the text anticipated many of our concerns. There's an actual discussion in the text on how does an adult child pay for this honor and respect with someone. And the answer is via time. This is Talmudic. And if you read the conversation, they understood, even then, that time has this value. There have been calculations, as you saw in the video before we started, calculations by such people as the AARP and various national caregiving organizations that have tabulated the amount of lost productivity to our economy due to family members needing time to care for someone. Many of us in this room have lived this. The drive to the doctor, the appointment, the drive to the drugstore after the appointment, the lunch, finally getting mom or dad settled back into the assisted living room or to the condominium. Before you know it, the day has gone by. The Talmud has understood that we pay through the giving of our time, and it is that time that so often provides us with those opportunities for meaning that so many have gotten lost with. The tradition also anticipated another scenario encountered by many of us here. We may have promised, and some of us have had this conversation, we may have promised never to put our loved one in one of those places. Yet as Alzheimer's advances, the challenge of caring for someone may and often does become too much for us. Do they start to wander? Is there that occasional fender bender? Do we get a call from the assisted living director that mom has left the kettle on too long and the sprinkler system was activated? Has dad started to become abusive? There may emerge that moment when we need to weigh the safety of our loved one with the respect for that person's autonomy. And the tradition has this case described as sakanat nefesh, a threat to one's own person, and by extension, someone else. When there is a threat to the safety of a person, the tradition says a higher value takes over that can supersede a person's wishes, as we are taught that we are not permitted to place our life in danger or by extension someone else's life. So Maimonides, again, 12th century, who's a practicing physician, set forth the following guide. This is an amazing quote when you really think that you can relate to this, and when you share this with families who come to talk to you, and they are, this is a real tension. I made this promise, but I can't do this anymore. This Maimonidean quote from the 12th century is absolutely fascinating. Listen to this. It's from this Mishnah Torah. One whose parent has become incompetent, or one translation, mentally impaired, should try to deal with him or her according to his or her condition until he or she is healed. But if it is impossible for the child to bear because the parent is so radically changed, the child may go and leave the parent in care of others. Unquote. That's 12th century Judaism. I think it's phenomenal. And forget the context. But to bring this forward, as colleagues do in counseling families, to understand that there are contexts when to support the dignity and sanctity of a human being, and to allow them to be cared for in a proper way that we can no longer do, the higher value is to, yes, there's organization and institutions that can do this. In an article from the journal Jewish Medical Ethics, Mark Popovsky looked at this tension as an example of the tension in caregiving between autonomy, what I want, and beneficence, the idea of doing no harm. He writes, quote, the core question, wrote Popovsky, is, quote, at what point is one's mental process so impaired that respecting that person's autonomy no longer constitutes a benefit worth the risk of that person's suffering, unquote. Embedded in this tension, I feel, always is the issue of a person's dignity and how best to honor and respect that dignity. And every colleague who's worked with families who are walking this walk can probably attest to this tension that exists with themselves, guilt, I want, I can't, I must, I promise, and weigh what is in the best interest to support the dignity and the sanctity of a person that they love. This tension is very real and palpable in so many families. Writing in a book that he edited on Judaism and Alzheimer's, our colleague Rabbi Doug Cohn offers a suggestion by again going to a classic text. Pirkei Avot reminds us that, quote, in a place where no one acts as a human being, strive to act like a human being. If Alzheimer's disease, writes Rabbi Cohn, is that place where there is diminishing or no humanity, then the Mishnah charge, strive to be a human being, must fall on others who are capable of fulfilling its command, unquote. This conversation, and the ones that may evolve from today's meeting, reminds us of the absolute importance of each family developing a care plan. That includes the discussions, as difficult as they may be, of advanced medical directives, healthcare powers of attorney. If I am unable to speak of my wishes, which member of my family may be responsible for what action and in what circumstance, and generally the discussion of one's wishes given the realities of medical technology and family dynamics. Having these conversations is becoming more and more of a necessity. We'll talk about this in the Caring Community breakout. I urge you, if you're a member of a congregation's caring community, I urge you, please, if you're a member of one of these committees in your community or whatever structure that you're in that handles these issues, to institute at least a yearly educational forum for your membership so that they can learn what Jewish approaches are to be made in the decisions as life begins to ebb. Our people, most of our people do not know this. The Jewish tradition is filled with tremendous insights, and especially given the dynamics and the wild cards of what we're talking about today, having these conversations in a safe way, embraced from the Jewish tradition, you will help people along the way in making these decisions. It's absolutely essential. And this leads me to another thought that is slowly being discussed within our community. Emphasis on the word slowly. Vocabulary. And Dr. Grossberg actually alluded to this in part of his presentation. The tradition has legal terms for boundaries as life begins to ebb. The two most well-known are goses, which refers to a person whose life is imminently ending, and trefa, which stands for a person who has been, according to tradition, marked for death. In other words, a person who may be living with a terminal illness, but whose death is not imminent. A question now being raised, albeit slowly, is if, given the changing nature of medical technology in general, and for example, Alzheimer's and dementia in particular, does Judaism need to develop a new vocabulary to deal with this stage of illness, an illness that can last for years and perhaps decades? And this conversation is slowly starting to emerge as colleagues begin to say we have these new phenomena, the strength of Alzheimer's, dementia issues. Do we need to perhaps reinvent or reinterpret traditional terms to better speak to the families that are walking this walk? Alzheimer's opens the door to discussions like these regarding the levels of treatment, right? And also, I suggest a possible change in family life. For example, let me say that what I'm about to talk about is not for everyone. Please listen, it's not for everyone. And it may be considered by some somewhat controversial. And also, this scenario that I'm about to describe is not fictional, but I would wager is known to some of you sitting here this morning. This goes to the section of whether the Jewish community in the United States in the beginning of the 21st century, given what we're learning about this situation and the family dynamics that surround this situation, needs to have a conversation about some of the changes that may be taking place within our own families vis-a-vis Alzheimer's. I refer to the real challenge of the spouse who may right now be leaving an Alzheimer's facility, concerned on a very profound spiritual level, and knows that now he or she must pick up the phone and make an appointment to talk to their rabbi. That the spouse that they just left is at that point in that disease where they barely know the well spouse. They barely know, if at all, the kids when they come in to visit. And this, say, 70-year-old person, healthy and vigorous, who as a result of a series of circumstances has become involved with another person, a person who provides emotional, spiritual, and yes, physical support. Should we as a community or as congregations now work to now redefine the concept of adultery in light of Alzheimer's? As I said, this is not for everyone. And it has been somewhat controversial, as I've discovered when we do sessions on new rituals and have written articles on this subject. Yet, this is not a fictitious scenario. It is a real issue, and it is being lived right now by real people. And given the statistics of the aging of the baby boomers, will continue to be a concern and a reality. Another look at the tradition. In the daily Amidah prayer, we talked about this yesterday afternoon at Shariam. We read a prayer that I would suggest to you is one of our more profound. A translation goes, "Heal us, O God, and we shall be healed. Save us, and we shall be saved. Grant full healing to our every illness, wound, and pain. Blessed is God who heals the sick." Note that we Jews do not pray for a cure. We pray for healing. How can that be as we journey on this path of Alzheimer's? How can we pray this prayer? Can someone be healed as they and a family traverse this journey? This is very, very difficult to consider, given the nature of medicine and the mentality of the victory of cure versus the defeat of death. Yet let me suggest that this prayer speaks to a spiritual realm, not necessarily medical. Can someone be spiritually healed as they suffer from Alzheimer's? Can their families? Yes, every case is its own story, but maybe this illness works its way through a family. Opportunities for gratitude can emerge. The power of memory can be harnessed to reflect on how grateful we can be for our life and our relationships. Perhaps the spiritual healing can allow for past hurts to be forgiven. Perhaps in our prayer for healing, we can embrace a life and with it celebrate our most precious of needs, hopes, and desires, that of loving someone and being loved. For in the end, isn't that what rests at the heart and soul of each one of us here today? The loss of a life does not mean the loss of a love. The need for healing on a deep spiritual and personal level is now being expressed with increasing regularity through the creation of new rituals, prayers. Prayers and rituals, as you know, help connect us to our collective history and help place us within the context of a sacred community and a sacred history. No less the issue of Alzheimer's. So in closing, please accept these few examples of new prayers recently written that really speak to the topic of today. Think of them in the context of that healing wish. These are part of a whole explosion of new rituals and prayers, part of one of the workshops we do from Sacred Aging. And these are just a couple. This is from a book that we did a couple of years ago on mental health in Judaism. And this is a Mishaberach designed to be done at synagogue on a Friday night or Shabbos morning, specifically geared to individuals and families dealing with the issue that we're discussing today. May God, who blessed our fathers and mothers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, grant blessed healing to all those members of our congregation and members of our families who struggle with mental illness. May God be with them in their illness and give them patience, hope, and courage. May God so endow their attending physicians and therapists with insight and skill that they may soon be restored to health and vigor of body and mind. May God be with their families too and grant them patience, hope, and courage. May God remove their anger and wipe away their feelings of guilt. May God endow them with a full life and with love that they too may enjoy health and vigor of body and mind. And may God bind up their wounds, and may they enjoy many a simcha and thank God for the blessings of health as we say Amen. It's for a congregation. This is a Mishaberach written by Rabbi Medwin for chronic illness. Eternal God, we ask for mercy and compassion. For those who are burdened with chronic illness, give them the strength and courage to face the daily challenges of their lives. Compassionate one, give them and their loved ones hope for the future, and at the same time acceptance of the present. Help them to find a path towards spiritual wholeness. Be by their side. Help them to know that you are with them at all times, even in times of doubt. Source of healing, comfort them and bring healing to their souls. Amen. And a prayer from a collection of prayers for healing published by the Central Conference of American Rabbis. From a book called Mishkan Refuah, Where Healing Resides. There are a couple of prayers. I'm just going to give you one, called Facing Dementia. This is designed, you've just gotten that diagnosis. This is an example of really what's a very creative wave that's happening now in the American Jewish community. Listen to these words. My God, I'm about to enter a wilderness. All that I have thought is me, my voice, my thinking, my memories will slip away, and I may not even comprehend it. As I enter this wilderness, my step quivers and my soul hurts. In this leap of faith, I will come to rely on so many, and we will all rely on you. Whom will I recognize? Who will recognize me? Even though my mind will change, please do not let the knitting of my soul unravel. Only you will know me, even if I do not know myself. Please help me to remember that others before me have found you in the wilderness. I am not sure I will know to look for you, but please look for me. The power of ritual, power of prayer, and we've heard it from Dr. Grossberg and now from our tradition. The challenge of being a family and the challenge of being a caregiver. And so this last prayer, a caregiver's prayer, for those of us who walk this walk in one way, shape, or form, listen to this language. Sustainer of the universe, help me to care for my loved one with hope, courage, and sensitivity. Grant me insight, resourcefulness, and the ability to ask for help and to accept help when it is needed. May I find the patience to overcome difficult moments and to find meaning and purpose in the smallest task. O eternal God, help me to remember to take care of myself so that I may have the strength to help others. Be with me and my loved one as we journey on this path together. May the one who makes peace in the heavens bring peace to me, to my family and loved ones, and to us all. Thank you very much.
Well, I had to take a moment to compose myself after those last two prayers. I am Stephanie. I'm with the Alzheimer's Association. And what a pleasure to see this room just filled with people who are compassionate and caring and want to do more for those families who have Alzheimer's disease. And our message to you today is that you are not alone. We very much hope that we surround one another with the spirit and the hope that this too is a disease that we can face and that we can change the lives in a meaningful way of both the people who have this disease as well as their care partners in this journey. My role now is to transition us a little bit into something that is rather unique and I don't think has ever been done here in St. Louis before. We're going to split apart our audience into two different sections today. One group of people who are concerned about the disease from a personal standpoint are going to stay in this room and be joined by Dr. Grossberg, who will come back to the stage and answer some of your in-depth questions. We realize that he covered a lot of material in the first part of his presentation. You'll have the opportunity, as you have those little half sheets, to fill out your questions about the disease. Pass those forward. I have team members who, if you hand that, just hold those up, they'll come by and collect them and we'll go through the questions. And then the congregational care teams, including so many of our rabbis who are here today, and thank you, if we could just do a quick round of applause for the rabbis who made it here today. We are so fortunate to have you. We know how difficult your schedules are, and we appreciate you spending time with us in fellowship. Those individuals, the congregational care teams, are going to go across the hallway. Marcia Graceman is going to lead that charge across the hallway, and you'll have some more in-depth time with Rabbi Address to really talk about how do we create dementia-caring communities within our synagogues. So we'll just take a moment and we'll reset. While we're resetting, I'm going to have my friend Brian here play just a very quick video about what the Alzheimer's Association can do to help families through this journey. And then if you are part of the congregational care team, you'll go across the hallway. If you'd like more time with the physician, Dr. Grossberg, you can stay here.
We're setting up.